Jami, author, speaker, artist, wife, mom, and friend. This week's episode is a little different, but like always, today's episode is brought to you by independent beauty consultant Jennifer Woolerton, the only person I trust with my face. You can find her link in the show notes. Without further ado, let's get this thing started. Hello, friend. I'm Jami, author and blogger at Sacred Ground Sticky Floors. Today's episode is Season 2, Episode 3, and I'm sharing an interview with you that I did with my new friend, Wendy Olson. Wendy is a fire wife, a special needs mom, an autoimmune disease warrior, and a social justice wannabe. She's a New Yorker that somehow ended up in Texas 29 years ago and has, quote, way more sass and attitude than this state can handle. We'll see about that, Wendy. She and her husband have 2 kids, and they live in the Fort Worth area. I'm sharing this interview with you because it had so many things in it I want you to know, and I know Wendy does too. Furthermore, I want more people to be blessed by Wendy's work. So, to reward you for listening, if you will go to iTunes and rate and review Wendy's show, which is actually called She's Got Gumption Podcast, and screenshot your review and then send it to me on Instagram at Jami Amerine with your name and mailing address. So you're just going to screenshot your review and then send it to me at JamiAmerine on Instagram in a DM message with your name and your mailing address. I will send you a treat. There's no drawing or anything like that. I'm just going to send you a treat for doing this. This offer is good through the end of 2018 only, so you've got a couple weeks. And I know this podcast is longer than I usually have, but we talked about so much. And as I was listening to it, I was just, first of all, I went into the interview with a heavy heart. I've just been in a valley season and a season of grief and struggle. And so when I first got on with Wendy, I thought, oh, Jesus, help me do my best with this one because I just need you. I was just weepy. I was having a hard time. And Wendy is just very authentic. And she, the questions and the things that we ended up talking about are all the things that I am about. The truth of who Jesus is and why he loved us. We talked a little bit about stolen Jesus and Sacred Ground Sticky Floors and burying husbands in the backyard and all the things that needed to be talked about. So anyway, so go rate and review Wendy Olson's podcast. She's Got Gumption. I'm going to put the link in the show notes, but she's pretty easy to find. And then screenshot that review. DM me on Instagram at Jami Amerine with that and your name and address, and I will send you a little treat. Like I said, link is in the show notes, and the link for independent beauty consultant Jennifer Woolerton is in the show notes. I know some of you are going to be traveling for Christmas. This is a great opportunity to really listen in. It is marked explicit. I listened to it. There's not any heavy cussing, but because there's just not, but we are candid about what we are going to talk about. So without further ado, here is Wendy. Hey guys, Jesus be all over you. I love you each.
Welcome to the She's Got Gumption podcast. I'm your host, Wendy J. Olson. On this podcast, we share stories of struggle, stories that are messy, stories that don't necessarily have a happy ending, but they do all share one thing. They all have Jesus. I call these Jesus stories, and on this podcast, we talk about the hard things. These are not neat and tidy and tied up in a bow stories. This is real life. This is raw life. This is your story. Welcome to another episode of She's Got Gumption. This week, I have Jami Amerine on the show. Jami is famous for being a mom and for her sarcasm and honesty in parenting and her walk with Jesus. She's the author of 2 books, Stolen Jesus and Sacred Ground Sticky Floors. She admits to being in a valley season after being in the public eye. I swear you open your mouth to tell the truth and right away someone is waiting to hit send on a hate email. I just love her vulnerability and ability to laugh at herself, telling humiliating stories and somehow turning them into Jesus life lessons. We talk about everything from breaking up with Jesus to adoption to our love of crime TV. Here's my conversation with Jami Amerine. Jami, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I have followed you now for several months, and I first heard you on Jen Hatmaker's podcast, and I was like, we should be friends, but we just don't live close enough together. I'm sure you get that a lot. But for people that don't know who you are, can you give them the 5-minute cliff notes of who you are and what you're about?
Sure. Like you said, my name is Jami Amerine, and I am married to Justin for 26 years. We have 6 children, 4 biological and 2 young adopted sons. Our oldest daughter, Maggie, is 23, and she runs an embroidery business out of her home. She lives here in the Houston area near us. And then John is our Marine, and he's adrift at sea somewhere. I'm not sure where. And then he's recently engaged to his best friend since the 5th grade. And she's actually studying abroad right now, but she'll be home around Christmas time. And then Luke is 19, and he lives here at home with us and works and studies. He's actually studying to be, I think he's working on his 400-hour certification in yoga. Sophie's our resident genius, and she's 16 and goes to high school here in the Houston area. And then we started all over again with foster care and adoption. And we have Sam, who's 6, and Charlie, who's 4. And we lovingly refer to them as the hashtag vandals on social media. And they're a riot. And let's see, I have an undergraduate degree in home economics, a graduate degree in education, counseling, and human development. And I have written 2 books. Stolen Jesus launched last year in October of 2017, and Sacred Ground Sticky Floors launched in October of this year, 2018. And I podcast at Sacred Ground Sticky Floors, and I blog at Sacred Ground Sticky Floors, and just all the writer things that writers do these days. I do those things. And then I also have an Etsy studio, which keeps me busy and creating. And my husband does that with me, and then also does his business on the side.
Wow. So you have a little bit going on. You're not very busy at all, are you?
Not really.
What?
A boring life.
It's so mundane.
Yeah.
What made you think after having 4 kids, like, hey, let's do this over again? It was so much fun the first time. Let's do it over again.
Well, I had always been fascinated with adoption or obsessed with it in some way, but we had a couple people at church that had approached us that had pregnant teenage daughters, and then nothing ever came of that. We had a long time pursuit of a very sick little boy named Daniel that actually he was terminally ill, and then he ended up going into the system, and we weren't certified, so we don't know what happened to him. By now I'm sure he's home with Jesus, but there's just kind of other stuff just kind of always got in the way of that. And then in 2010, my brother-in-law, my husband's older brother, who was our business partner and neighbor on our ranch in West Texas, was killed in a car accident. And it just was a year of atrocities, And when it had kind of just subsided, I called my husband and I said, I just feel like we've been lost in heartbreak, and I want to rewrite our story and be people of joy. And he went, okay. And I said, I want to adopt a baby. And he hung up on me. But 9 months from that day, we picked up Sam.
Wow.
And then Sam seemed very young, and I just felt like we needed to do it again. And so we looked into foster to adopt, and that's how we met Charlie. He was our first foster placement. And then we had another long-term placement that we referred to online as hashtag Joy Baby. She was with us for 2 years, and probably about 3 months before termination or adoption, I built a pretty strong relationship with her mom. Not pretty strong, very strong relationship with her birth mom. We spent a lot of time together, and I was paying bills, and Joy Baby was playing on the floor, and I felt like the Lord told me to text her birth mother and tell her that he loved her and that I loved her and that I believed she could do this. And I didn't want to, so I fought with him all day and out loud. Justin would be like, who are you talking to? Because I'd be like, I said no. But that night I went in and tucked her in and sat on the floor and sent the text. And 3 months later, she returned to her restored mama. And it's one of those stories that is hard, but it's also we were part of restoration. And so the last year since she's been gone for a little more than a year, we did not renew our license when we ended up moving to Houston to be closer to my family and closer to a major airport so I could go to speaking engagements and stuff, and thought we might get reinstated. And then it's been pretty obvious that God has something else in mind for us. And I think that is foster care reform, which would be reform in the areas of ministering to parents who have relinquished after a long period of time like we did, and also a ministry for people like Joy Baby's mom, who are good mamas that fell on hard times and that need support that they're not getting within the system. So that's kind of where our focus is right now. And the other reason that we started the Etsy shop was to help fund that mission.
That's amazing. And, you talked about being part of the restoration story. When you hear the word restoration or even the word healing, you just assume that that's going to be a really great time in your life. And the reality is it's not. It's really, really hard. Healing and restoration is hard. If you've ever renovated a house or, gone through a personal season of healing, I know personally for me, I did that, went through a healing season last year. And when I told people about it while I was going through it, it was hard. It was painful, but on the other side of that, here you have this mom who didn't think that she could do this life with this baby. And you were part of that. And that was really hard for you. But it ended up being probably life-changing for what we know, life-changing for her and her daughter.
Yeah, it is. I think I agree with you completely. We assume that restoration means, that you're finished, but actually restoration is usually a process.
Absolutely.
And I can't say that, or I won't say that we're not just heartbroken and grieving for that loss. And yet at the same time, we rejoice. And it is holding those two things at the same time, which I think we don't recognize as a possibility, but it is. We have laughter and we have joy, and we've also experienced loss, and that restoration story is ongoing. I always, from a very young age, actually when I was 17, I worked at a teen mom camp, and I actually worked in the nursery with the babies, and back then had an interest in helping mothers have a better life. And it's interesting because I, in some ways, forgot about it just because I was so busy raising my own kids. But it's weird how God even restored that image and that idea, and that he never forgot, even though I did. And even though, like, the things I did, like a home economics degree and a counseling and human development degree, I thought I knew what I was going to use those for. I thought for sure that it would be in helping young mothers. And then to have had that happen through foster care is interesting to me, that he used those original thoughts for something that he had in mind. So
I've heard several people say, that God wastes nothing. And I've heard, on the other side of all of this, whatever journey you're going through, all the things that God prepared you for in the beginning. Like, I have a photography degree. Like, okay, what am I ever really going to use that for other than when I used it for my photography business? I'm not using that now. What is God going to use that for later? And I just think it's so interesting that you have these degrees. And as soon as you said them, I was like, wow, that's perfect for what you're doing now. But you don't know that. You think you think you're like, don't worry, God, I've got this. I'm just going to do this thing and I'll meet you along the way. But God's got other plans. And when you're open to that, like you and your family so obviously are, it turns out so much better than you could have possibly imagined.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. All the things that I was interested in. I originally wanted a degree in journalism, and I had pretty much given no thought to writing and absolutely no thought to any kind of publicity as far as speaking or being interviewed, because I thought, well, I don't have anything to talk about. And he even used those. So it is interesting. And it is actually, as I say it out loud, a very hopeful place to be, to know that he instilled these things in us and he doesn't forget them, even if we do, so
absolutely.
He's a good father. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the things and the goals and the lost dreams, or the things that we thought were long forgotten, to recount that he's good and he knows us and he created us. And just like we parent well, he parents better. And
absolutely. And thank God for that.
Yes, really, truly.
As many gaps as there are in my parenting, I'm glad that Jesus fills those holes.
Me too. Me too. Yes.
So I just love the story. I can sit and talk about foster care and adoption and all that stuff for forever. That's like one of my heartbeats. I love hearing restoration stories like that. I love hearing stories. I'm in our family. We always say that, we have stories. If there's one thing, there's a story for everything, and it's never a short story either. And knowing that life is a journey and a journey in the making. Can you tell us, what's your story?
He is. This comes at an awkward time for me, because I personally have been in a valley, and it's been hard. It's been hard to be exposed. And as far as when you write, there's people that are going to come out against that, and there's,
of course,
relationships that change or end, and all of those things. My story really is that in my writing journey, I fell into the arms and the message of the truth of who he is. I thought I knew who he was. I thought I was raising my kids to know who he was. I thought I was in charge of my kids' relationship with him, and that if that faltered, that I let him down and he'd be disappointed. Truly, I have come to a place where I know I cannot be separated from him, and he loves me. He knows me. And it's not even just about believing that he exists. It's about believing what he says as the truth, as the whole truth, and that he loves us so madly that he died for us. And I when I first started writing, and I had just a few people look at something I'd written, I wrote that he craved us. And I had 4 or 5 people that said, you can't say he craves. He doesn't crave. He has everything. How can you crave? And so I took it out. But the truth is, I believe with all my heart that he craves us, because no one that craves something, if you crave something, you want it so badly, and he wanted it so badly, he died for us.
Yeah.
That's a craving. That's an unquenchable, craving, a desire. And when I think back on that, and when I revel in that, it is the thing that keeps me going. He craved me unto his death. And so that is him wanting to be with me, no matter how badly I behave. He died while we were still sinners. My story of my true salvation was a yes, but it is more than that now. It is, the yes was just the beginning of this journey of falling into the arms of this amazing God who died for me. so that we could be together and we could have that. And now he's given me an opportunity to say that out loud. And I am undone by that. I'm undone by his mercy. I'm undone by grace. I'm undone by this love. I want more of it. I want even the dark, low places, because those dark, low places, they're just the foot of the cross. It's not that I'm like sitting around waiting for them to happen, but even in this valley place that I'm at, I feel most near to him and most cared for, like I never have before. And I think it's one thing to say yes to him, but it's another thing to fall into those arms and know that it's okay. To know that it's okay to grieve, to know it's okay to be mad, to know it's okay to be sad. And I think especially for women, we need to hear that. We need to know, because I really do think we're fed the message that, you know, if you're depressed and you need help for something like that, that you've let him down or your faith isn't strong enough. Or if
you're doing something wrong.
You're doing something wrong. You cannot be separated from his love. You cannot be separated from the love of God. And that has been paramount for me in my testimony. I cannot be separated from him. He loves me so much. He died for me. And it's so much bigger than advice giving or writing, you know, for me, even like I was recently approached about doing a Bible study, and I am all about that, of course, but I want it to be so much bigger than just line by line, verse by verse. Don't do this, do this. This is wrong. This is right. Those kind of scenarios, and more about this is this God that has arms open wide unto his death to love you, to be with you.
And how do you write that? Like,
right?
How do you can't even give words to that to make
No, you can't
write that down. And here, just put it in a 55,000 word book and put a pretty cover on it, and it'll save the world. No,
no. No, I know. It's so, it's in some ways that can be daunting to think that it is about us, or about me, or about any one person. I think I fully believe that he blessed in my scenario, me with a gift for anecdotal tales that end up turning into something. But I mean, I have, you know, stupid stuff happen. I even look back at my first book, Stolen Jesus, where I was half naked in Walmart, and remember that story is so humiliating and it's so ridiculous and so silly. And then the way that it ended up being woven into the story of Stolen Jesus.
Can you recount that story? Because I haven't read it, but I want to know about it now.
I am.
You're having it in Walmart. I'm immediately interested.
Yeah, I'm one of those. I have to check BuzzFeed every once in a while, see if my butt's on BuzzFeed. I had on a hippie skirt, like a t-shirt skirt, and flip-flops and a t-shirt, and was walking through Walmart, and I just felt this tug, and then tripped, and I looked down, and my skirt had got caught in the wheel of my cart.
Yeah. And
pulled completely off my body before I even realized that it was off. And I was standing there. I mean, it was off my body in a t-shirt and my Hanes are away underwear and flip-flops. Yeah.
And you were like, what's this draft?
And then it was so tight in the wheel. So I'm like pulling on it, trying to get it out. And it wouldn't come out. So it was like a prolonged incidence of no pants in Walmart.
Like more than a second of like, oops. Like
my undies showed. Undressed in Walmart. Undressed in Walmart. Yeah. So I pulled on it. I had a cup of Starbucks like in the baby seat. You know, I was by myself. And so I'm pulling on it, and it wouldn't come. And so finally I just braced one of my feet. I could hear some people laughing. Braced one of my feet my foot up on the basket and pulled as hard as I could. And it ripped the skirt, and my coffee went flying in the air and just landed right on my shirt. And I pulled my mangled skirt on and bolted. Never went back.
You've never been back to that Walmart ever?
Nope. Never went back. Never went back.
Amazing. From that, what's the Jesus story out of that? Like, I gotta know.
That was like the arc of stolen Jesus. So I broke up with Jesus. There had been a series of like horrible things.
Yeah.
And I'd been in the hospital and I'd been just tons of stuff. And I got in my car and covered in coffee with a ripped skirt and went, I am done with you. And this was the mentality. I do good stuff and bad stuff keeps happening. So it goes back to a lot of what I end up writing about, which is an if-then Jesus. If I do this, then he'll do this.
Yes.
And it's such a warped relationship with him because, and to that end, we don't parent like that. If our kids are bad, we don't stop parenting them. Yes. If our kids are good, we might do something nice for them, but when they're bad, we still fix them breakfast. It's not a real, a relationship with God. There is no contingency other than belief, the belief that we are his children. Is there contingency in your parenthood? Do you question, or do your children question whether or not you're in a parent-child relationship? No, it's just understood. But we put contingency on our relationship with God. And that was my unraveling. That was how I fell into the arms of grace, is that I really believed in this if-then Jesus. I'm doing good things and you just let me be naked in Walmart and you've done this. And then I was in the hospital and we were got financial trouble and and so I broke up with him. I was like, I'm done trying to please you, and ended up in these ridiculous situations. And I know it sounds very immature, but part of the way that I write and speak is that I confess that I was naked in Walmart and then I broke up with Jesus.
But your vulnerability is genuine too. I mean, because that's a real thing. Like, people think, oh, you can't be angry at God. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can.
Have you read some of the Psalms? David gets pretty pissy. I'm just saying.
Yeah, he does. and God never turns from him. And this is our mentality, is that, and I liken it to all the ways, and this is paramount in stolen Jesus, is all the ways that I had allowed him to be stolen from me. Well, and I also stole a painting of Jesus that we call Stolen Jesus. So it's called, that's the name of the book. But all the ways that he's taken from us, and all the ways we allow him to be taken from us, and all the ideas that we have that steal him from us in his true glory, is, I think, really do come down to an if-then mentality. And so the other day, the vandals were being horrible. I mean, we had a horrible morning. They were beating each other up and kicking and screaming. But not once when it was resolved or whatever, did they say, are you still my mom?
Yeah.
And not once did I ever think, I wish I hadn't taken this road and into adoption, and they're my sons. I'm their mom. But we do that with God. Oh, that was probably his last straw. And women in our Western culture, and I try not to ever speak for other people, but me, all of the things that I put on myself as have to's, this is how I have to behave in order to please God so that I'm his daughter, separated me from him. He was there the whole time. And I was like, that was it. I went over my Weight Watchers points. He hates me now. Yeah. Stuff that was not even relevant to a parent-child relationship. And so falling into the arms of a Jesus that is holy, your God and Father, and there's nothing you can do to separate yourself from him, is huge. It's enormous in truly knowing who he is.
I think the challenge for me is, like, I'm 38 now, and I came to know Jesus when I was 15. The gap between knowing who Jesus truly is and knowing what I knew about him in the beginning is, like, huge for me. It's, I walked away I broke up with Jesus, when I was 18, and then I wandered away for probably another 14 years and only came back when I was 32 and had my second child. And getting to re-know Jesus, but getting to know him the right way took a lot of time. How are you? I guess what I want to know is, how do we get our kids off on the right start, knowing the right Jesus, and not having to go through all of that? Do you have any wisdom in that?
Well, I say this often, and I think it is important. You can't make your kids love Jesus. You cannot do that. So stop trying. You can tell them about Jesus, and you can model a healthy relationship, which is to, I think, emphasize there is no true conditional love. There's no condition on this. I love you still. And I think that is in our verbiage, which is, I started catching myself doing this a long time ago, but I didn't apply it to Jesus until I started writing. But is the I love you, but like when we discipline, I love you, but you can't do that. Well, no, I love you. Now then, we have this, and this, and this. I love you. I love you still. And that is true of a sorry also. I'm sorry, but there is no sorry. There's no but in a good sorry. I'm sorry. Now then, da 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 da. But when we do that with Jesus, if we think that there's a but in what Jesus did for us, I think that that's most important. And Charlie came home the other day, and he'd gotten in trouble at school again. And he said, sometimes I'm bad and sometimes I'm good. And I went, nope, you are good. You're a good boy. I love you. Jesus loves you. You're an amazing human being. I just think you're wonderful. Now then, these behaviors, these things are your consequences. This is what's happening because of this, right? Your teachers are having to put you in timeout. You're not getting to go to recess. This, and this. Those are your consequences. And I think it's most important that we allow our children to face their consequences and not intervene in them, because that's just natural law. And if we're doing that at home, right? So then now when your kids are older and they face consequences, those consequences aren't indicative of their relationship with God. They're the natural consequences for behaviors on this earth. He still loves them. There's no I love you, but. He didn't get on the cross and go, I love you, but now here's what you have to do. He got on that cross and said, I love you. Yeah, I just love you. I'm in love with you. I think you're amazing. I think you're wonderful. I love you. And then sometimes we're faced with consequences, and he's there with us. And I think that showing them that in how we speak about God, how we speak about them, is so important, because he sees us as blameless. That's, scriptural. He loves us. He sees us. He smells us as he sees and smells Christ. But what we've done is we've created this consequential scenarios in our verbiage and in our behaviors that then reflect how that God might react to our children, because we're their first glimpse at this Jesus.
Yes.
So loving them and I think fully explaining consequences, the consequences of this behavior or this, and this, and this, and there's no but. I love you. And these are the consequences. And I think that's important. I think it's very important. And I kind of lucked out, I guess. Even though my older children, the 3 adult ones especially, were raised in more of a tree of good and evil, this is good, this is bad, do this, get bad, do this, get good kind of mentality. And it doesn't pan out in adulthood and how we view God. Because how many people do you know that, diligently pay their tithes or never miss church, and then they, lose everything in a house fire? Well, what sense does that make? God doesn't make sense like that. But the reason that he doesn't make sense is because he's not consequential. He's not burning down houses or saving people from brain tumors because they're good or bad. He just loves. He just loves. And explaining him like that and then modeling that, I think, helps a lot. And it gives parents, I think it gives me quite a bit of peace of mind as a parent, because I can't predict what's going to happen based on good or bad. I mean, to some extent you can, if you're really good at your job, you could get promoted, but your company could also go under and you could lose everything.
Yeah.
So even if you were good, you could still have bad, right? So I think that is a really excellent model for life is life and God is just good. He's just good. He doesn't change. He's just good.
I love that you can put words to that too. And in our house, we just started Sadly enough, we just started doing more natural consequences with my older son. He's 13. He'll be 14 in a couple weeks. He has autism. And so naturally, as a special needs parent, I'm gravitated towards trying to rescue him and save him and make him more normal, which hasn't really worked out in the last 13 years, probably a lot more when he was younger, but I still am not able to control everything and everyone around him. I can shelter, I can hover, I can be a helicopter parent, but that just puts way more pressure on me. And now that we do natural consequences, like last night, he didn't wash his comforter until very late. And so he didn't have a comforter to put on his bed last night. And I said, well, then you have to get your own blanket from somewhere. You have to, I mean, there's 50 blankets in this house. He can easily get up and go get a different one. But he didn't have his blanket because he didn't finish his chores that he was supposed to. He decided to sit and watch TV instead. So as a natural consequence, next time when he goes to do his laundry, he'll follow through because he's already learned without me having to nag at him or anything else. It takes me out of the equation and me stop having to work so hard at nagging him, which who wants to be the nag all the time, you know?
Right. You're right.
It's exhausting. It's not exhausting for the person that's being nagged. I mean, sure, it's probably a little bothersome, but it's more exhausting for the person that's doing the nagging.
Right. And I think too, for me, I know this was true, but in our society, their behavior feels like a direct reflection on us, whether good or bad. And so that is actually a recurring theme in Sacred Ground, Sticky Floors. Where do they stop and I begin?
Yes.
And where does, but here, this is, I think, very important. God's character, God's goodness doesn't change because of me. My character and I've changed I've grown or I've grieved or whatever because of stuff my kids have done, but it didn't change who I was. It didn't change that I was still Jami. And we get pretty caught up, especially with social media, because everybody can see our bare Heinies, but that literally in some cases, but behavior, their shortcomings or even their greatness somehow is a reflection on us. And so I talk about this quite a bit in Sacred Ground, Sticky Floors with our son, Luke, our third child, who's now 19 and he's doing really well. But he wrote the afterword to Sacred Ground, Sticky Floors because so much of the book was about him and our struggles with him. And at one point we had to send him away to military school to save him from himself. I mean, it was just a nightmare. It was the lowest point in my existence to this day. It was horrible. And I knew that this one particular woman had been talking really nasty stuff about me, about how awful I was, and she would never do that. And, people had told me that she was talking about me. And we were at Sophie's piano recital, and Sophie can play the piano by ear since she was 2. And I mean, by ear. Like she can hear a song one time and sit down and play it. It's weird. She gets awards in algebra. She speaks fluent Spanish. She's a genius. I'm dyslexic and barely graduated from high school. And so this woman's headed toward me, and I thought, oh, great, because I didn't want to talk to her. I knew she'd said some really ugly stuff about me. And she said, you must be so proud that she can play so well. It's just amazing that she plays so well, and you must be so proud. And she walked off, and I thought, well, first of all, I had nothing to do with that. I can't teach anybody else how to play the piano, let alone by ear. And what am I? Am I awful or am I amazing? She's done an amazing job with Sophie. That was one of the things she said. So I failed Luke and I did amazing with Sophie. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And it's that accusation as mothers, I think, that prompts us sometimes to intervene in consequences, which I firmly believe we cannot do every single time. It's not good for them and it's not good for us. Right. But it's also indicative of, so what, God, if I'm successful and you're not, God parented me better than he parented you. It makes no natural law sense at all. It's
like, is God really up there saying, dude, you're making me look bad?
Right.
I don't think so.
No, it's not. I mean, and to that extent, you have people that say, and even as a parent of adult children that have had to go out and find their own answers and stuff, I overheard them say stuff like, well, I hate Christians. Well, no, that's really not even fair. first of all, you have to step in and get to know people. And then judging an entire population on one bad behavior isn't fair either. And
Absolutely.
judging, and certainly to take it to the next step, which I think happens with so many people, is that we get hurt, we get church hurt, or a Christian hurts us.
Yeah.
And we allow that to be a reflection on God. That's about us. That's not about him.
Yeah.
It's not about him. He's just good. That's all he is.
The church would be perfect if people weren't in it.
That's exactly right. It would be rocking and rolling. Yeah. So, there's so much to all that. I mean, we could go on for days, but I think it is important for us to realize that we as parents we're affected, but we are not, our core values are rarely changed, or who we are cannot be affected by whether or not they're doing well or bad. And to the same extent, if we're doing well or bad, we can't expect that God is changed by that. He stays the same.
That's powerful too, because I really feel like where do they end and I begin, especially in parenting, can be like, okay, eventually they're making their own choices. And so much of society will make you think that their choices are a reflection of you, but you can be in a family and have a brother who makes poor choices. Does that mean that they're reflected poorly on me as well? It's just such a weird and interesting psychological dynamic there, because it makes no sense, when you really think about it. But here we are as women, taking on that extra burden. Like, we don't have enough to deal with. Let's take on this whole identity crisis thing that I'm sure we've only dealt with since our preteens, staring at ourselves in the mirror and judging ourselves and letting everyone else judge us as well. Let's also add children into the equation of formulating our identity. Yeah. And that's so unhealthy.
Yeah. And separates us from our God, who is our identity. And I, believe me, I understand. So it's not like I'm up here going, oh, it doesn't affect me. When I get a note home from that particular Vandal's teacher that he's had another bad day, it feels like it's my fault. It feels like she's going, and she may very well just be going home and to her husband and going, those Amerines are the worst parents in the world.
But that's her choice.
But that's her choice. And it really doesn't have anything to do with what I know about Charlie and what I know about myself and what I know about my God. And so it's separating those things and remembering who we are in Christ and what he means to us. And I do think I probably am more confident in my parenting and in who I am since I've come to know that I cannot be separated from him. And that is a process of restoration. But I'm still Jami, and I was daughter long before I was mother, and I will be daughter long after they're all gone and have done their own thing. And he is not going to change how he feels about me based on what they're doing, or even what I'm doing. He loves me just like I love them as a good parent does. And good things are going to happen and bad things are going to happen. He does not change.
Tell us a little bit more about your second book that just came out in October, Sacred Ground, Sticky Floors. Where was that birthed out of?
So it was our first, I hadn't written anything. I really hadn't written a word except for stuff on Facebook. I just would post stupid stuff my kids did. And then we got our first foster placement, which was Charlie. And he was injured and I was exhausted and overwhelmed. And I texted a seasoned foster mom and said, we have our first foster placement. This is what's going on. I haven't slept in a week and or 3 or 4 days, whatever it was. And she texted back. I thought she was going to text back something brilliant and encouraging. And she just texted back, get a journal and keep a record of this time you are on sacred ground. And I remember thinking, what? I just, sacred ground to me was images of, Moses at the burning bush or Mary at the foot of the cross. It's just, there was nothing sacred as far as what I was seeing going on. And then we had a colossal apple juice spill, which we're still feel the ramifications of. I always tell people it was kind of like the Exxon Valdez.
Oh my! How much apple juice is that?
It was like one of those Sam's size or Costco size bargain, like 1.5 gallon, great big huge.
Holy mackerel! The whole thing.
The whole thing.
Oh wow!
The whole thing. And then it was like a couple days later, I was sleeping in the same chair that I'd been sleeping with Charlie, and I could hear the kids, the older kids, cooking in the kitchen. And it was late, and Sam playing with cars in his room. And I just could, everything was like my senses were on overload, I think, because I just hadn't slept, and there was just so much emotion. And I remembered that sacred ground, and I thought, with sticky floors.
Exactly.
And that was it. And it just popped into my head. And so I think it was, I had gotten in trouble with somebody put a picture of us on Facebook with me holding the baby, and I got off of Facebook, and then we got the flu, and I didn't have a voice and didn't have anywhere to say anything. I asked my husband if I could borrow his computer, and he said yes, and I knocked out 60,000 words in 9 days.
Wow.
and titled it Sacred Ground, Sticky Floors. And then the publisher is actually the one that put the subtitle, How Less Than Perfect Parents Can Raise Kind of Great Kids. And I didn't fight over it, but I just emailed them, and I was like, that makes it sound like a how-to book.
Yeah.
And they were like, we're in love with it. And I was like, okay, because there's just only so much you can do, And I was like, okay. And then I was praying about it. And to be honest, I was emotional about it because I knew the content, and I didn't want people to think, oh, here's a how to parent book. And it just, as a flash in my mind, it's not a how-to book. It's a how-he book. It's how he saves. It's how he restores. It's how he parents. And I love that he offered me that, because that's what it is. It's not about me. It's about him.
And it's so challenging, especially in a world that tells you should try to garner as much attention for yourself, to be like, no, I want to just keep pointing to him. I don't want it to be.
It is. Yeah. That's the worst part of the publishing process for me, is all the stuff that you're supposed to do to promote self.
Yeah.
And, be in the limelight. And
even in the Christian book world, which.
Oh gosh, yes. Because it's really the only way that they advertise anymore is through social media and through media in general and for me, it's like, I even told him at one point, I was praying about it, and I was like, that book, Jesus Calling, that Sarah Young wrote.
Yeah.
There's plenty of people. I'm not bringing it up so that people will go nuts or anything, but she doesn't do interviews or any of that stuff. And I was like, if you'll get this message out there, I'll be her. I'll just lock myself in my room and watch Parks and Rec. And
really, she doesn't do interviews or anything.
As a matter of fact, I just saw she just did something. I want to say that it was Amy Grant or something, and it was one of her first public appearances.
That's fair, though. That's kind of, as a writer, you just, like, when I was growing up and writing short stories and dreaming of one day publishing my own book, I pictured Stephen King sitting in his log cabin upstairs in a corner on his desk typing on his typewriter, because I'm old enough to remember a typewriter. And that's what I thought a writer's life would be like. Because I didn't want it to be about me. I just wanted to be about the story. Whatever, how the story touched whoever, right? Whether it touched one person or 50,000, didn't matter. But here it is. And you approach someone about having a book published, and the first thing they're worried about is how many followers you have on your platforms. And if I'm being real honest, I hate social media. It's so annoying. And every once in a while, it connects you with someone great. And you're like, okay, I'll stick around for this. But everything else has got to go, Yeah.
Well, and I would say, like, about Facebook, I almost never check my personal Facebook anymore, but my Facebook and my Instagram, both, it's like I have so much connection with real women that it leaves me undone. And so I'm grateful for that. And I actually, when I speak at writers' conferences, that's one of the things I speak about is, as Christians, he knew about Facebook before Facebook knew about Facebook. So this is the platform that we've been given, and it's pulpit. It's your mission field. This is where you get to reach and so it is a mixed bag. And I would be lying if I didn't say that there have been days that I thought, you know what? I think I'm just done. I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. And if he wants to sell it, he'll sell it. And if he wants people to hear it or read it, they'll hear it or read it. But every time he is quick to remind me, no, this is the route we're going. And I did throw in the towel very early on when I first wrote Sacred Ground, Sticky Floors. My parents sent me to Mount Hermon's Writers Conference. And when I found out what platform was, because I knew nothing. I just took this and I was like, here, publish this. And they were like, well, no, because you have to have a following. I flat out went back to my room, and my mom was there, and she said, well, and I said, I'm done. I'm a foster mom and a mom. I'm just chase a stage. This is not at all what I had in mind. And so that was actually so that was March of 2015. I wrote the first draft of Sacred Ground 60 Floors in December of 2014. So it's March of 2015. And one of the other authors came to me and said, you're not leaving here without starting a blog. And I was like, yeah, no. And she was like, no, I'm serious. We're not leaving this room until you've set it up. And so I did. And I put up 9 posts between March 2015 and September 2015. September 2015, I posted on my phone an open letter to my children. You're not that great. And overnight had 600,000 readers.
Wow.
And within a month or two was signed with an agent and then and that's not even anywhere near what I write about now or important to me, but it was what he used.
The vehicle. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag of having to voice what you're saying if you believe in it. And then there's also that huge part of me that just goes, him, not me. But it is hard because, and I actually recently was approached by someone about doing some writing for them that would eventually, it would lead to me, but it was going to be not Christian. It was just mainstream. And I sat down and started to kind of tinker with it. And he is at the core of why I do everything.
Right.
And without him, there just isn't Jami the writer. And so I've surrendered to that. I can't write anything else because he is, to me, everything. It would not be the same. It would not have the depth or the meaning, or I don't even think the humor if not for him.
Thank you for sharing that too, because I think it's really important that people hear that side of things and not just, I think people need to hear that as a writer, most of us don't really want to be out in the
right
at all.
Yeah.
So I love hearing that perspective of yours of like, it's a mixed bag. And when we talk about the vehicle that like launched you to where you needed to be, we never know what that vehicle is going to be. And sometimes haphazardly, it's something that we just post in the moment. That's like, really? That's what got your attention?
Yeah.
That's not anything I talk about at all. I was talking about a red dress. I talk about Jesus all the time. Like why?
Yeah.
But
why that?
Yeah, exactly. And
my vomit blog. I have a blog that's another viral blog that I just refer to as the vomit blog, and it's been featured on Scary Mommy and just all these places. And I can't even remember how many reads it has, and it's not even my best. It was just a rant about stay home if you're vomiting. I don't need to see you in public. And people loved it. But if that was also what brought and actually, you know what it is? I have one reader still that just finished Sacred Ground Sticky Floors and said, you're almost there. Which I knew meant in changing her mind, which is not my responsibility to change her mind. But after I wrote the vomit blog, she said, I sat up all night and read everything you've ever written. And she said, and I am a non-believer. I do not believe that there's a God, but I wanted you to know that I'm here and I'm watching.
Wow.
So, even to that end, I was criticized by several readers. Well, I was criticized for being on Hatmaker. I was criticized for being on Scary Mommy, and just people that get nasty about it.
Oh, of course. Everyone.
Yeah. And Christians are some of the meanest critics you can run into. But so that I say, somebody said, how can you be on something secular? Well, okay, where else is, I can preach to the choir all day long and you guys can go, but what was the true meaning of, spreading the good news? And if you're going to spread the good news, sometimes that means you have to go into the bars and the alleys.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it means you have to go where people don't agree with every single thing that one or the other of you are saying. But to me, that's growth. That's challenge. That's looking at other people's points of view and then having empathy and sympathy and compassion and Jesus love where you might not. It's, if you're just boxed up and not speaking to the masses, then what good does it do? And I think it's in Sacred Ground Sticky Floors that I know it is. There's one person that has this huge platform, like hundreds of thousands of people, and she gets on every morning and rants and raves about this one issue that she's against. And I mean, within minutes, 20,000 people have watched it. It's got, 45 shares. But who's she talking to?
Yeah.
She's talking to people that agree with her. And she's not saying anything that's healing or life-giving or hopeful. She's just mad. And everybody that's watching her is mad too. Yeah. And okay, whatever. Go ahead. I'm not telling her to stop. I'm just saying, what is your goal for what you're saying? What is the goal that you have for what you're saying or what you're trying to do? Who are you trying to reach? I personally want to reach mamas that are hurting, or actually just women in general that are broken and hurting. Like I've been broken and hurt, and I've found comfort and rest in the truth of who Jesus Christ is. And it's not so much a rant as it is, this is what he's done for me, and he can do it for anyone.
And I think, sometimes we get so boxed in, and I know I'm speaking from experience here. My word this year was renew. And I never know exactly where that's going to take me. At the beginning of the year, I always write out a bullet journal I have for a few years now. And I'll pray about, what verse or what word. This year, my color, there was a color and it was red. And that's led me like a million different places because I'm just noticing it more. And my word for the year was renew. And little did I know that what God wanted to teach me was so outside the box of my normal, quote unquote, religious thinking, and teach me something new. And if I'm not open to learning something new about God, then I'm going to be missing out on so much, because I'm just going to keep him in my nice, tidy little box, and he's just going to stay there. And then my faith is just never going to grow. I want to learn different things. I want to learn other people's perspectives. I want to know why they think that. Maybe I should think that. Maybe that's God trying to reach me to say, hey, have you ever thought about this? I want to be open to that, because if my faith isn't growing, then it's really just dying. It can't, if it just stays stagnant, it's not going anywhere. I always say, if you will not believe the same things that you believe 5 years from now. You will have experienced new things. You will learn new things. You will grow, hopefully. And as you're getting older, if you're not getting wiser, you're doing it wrong. If we're not open to hearing someone else's perspective, then we're not open to growing and knowing a different side of God that we may have never thought of before. We've been to countless churches in our moving around, but we used to move every year and a half. We've been here a year and a half now. We're not moving, so it's it's good for us. But in each place that we went and each new church that God brought us to, we learned something totally different in each one. In one, we learned how to pray. In another, we learned what healing is. We went to a super charismatic church for a while, which was totally outside of our comfort zones, but taught us something new. And we were able to take that and move to the place where we're at right now. But had we said no to that because it makes me uncomfortable that, people dance in the aisles or whatever, was weirding me out about that place, then I would have missed out on something.
Yeah. And I think it's easy. Well, what you said about, that you're not growing if your mind's not changing or not believing different things. I think that some people, and I did this for years, this was the comfort zone was where I wanted to stay. And, it really is getting outside of your comfort zone before you are challenged or made to see something in a new light. And then sometimes those things just happen, even in the bubble, even in that box. And then how are you going to react to them? Usually hostile, in a hostile way or in a terrified way. And I have one of those posts that I still get emails about. And it was actually 2 reasons to hate Joel Osteen. And here's it. So people read it just because they were like, what? She's going to be on my side or she's on this side. And my only point was, what are you so upset about? What is he doing directly to you? And people would be like, well, he's a false teacher. So what?
Yeah.
Why in the world does it upset you that badly? And I have proposed that there's only 2 reasons. 1, you're afraid, and 2, you're jealous. Well, perfect love casts out all fear. So why are you afraid? And jealous, and people are like, well, no, I'm not. Well, I mean, it's pretty easy to be jealous of somebody that has as much as he has.
Millions,
and a platform and this place where he gets to say what he wants to say. So is that it? And are you looking at it? Because this is what I see when I see this venomous outpouring towards this man who I've heard say the name of Jesus, who I know gives money to people, who sure as anything, I probably don't agree with some of the stuff that he says. And I think he's a little different. He's a little odd, but whatever. But is he directly impacting me? And if he is saying the name of Jesus, which is what Paul says, so long as it is preached, okay, so there's that. And do you not believe that God could use him and has used him? So what are you so upset about? And we just get venomous, like, and lose our minds over something that really has nothing to do with us. I was first introduced to Jesus in the Mormon church. He did not leave me in the Mormon church. Right. And that's actually, though, you would probably like Stolen Jesus. It's like all the church hopping that we did and all the religions that we were and all the things that I believed and all of these things that put that into who I thought he was. But we're real quick to do that and then box it in. I'm not going outside of this. This is my belief system. This is what I believe about Joel. And I'm not going outside of that. You're not going to convince me otherwise. Well, why? Why are you so afraid that you're right? Or that you're wrong? Why are you so afraid of finding out you're, wrong about something or right about something else? And I think that's a very stagnant way of living out our faith.
Mm. The angry Christian epidemic.
Yes.
You almost can't have one without the other because everybody's just so angry and irate about everything. I mean, you remember the Starbucks cup situation?
Oh my gosh.
I had to laugh because my husband went out to get Starbucks and it was the holiday cup. And I was like, let me look at it. Let's make sure I'm angry about something.
I know.
But it's really like, how do you really think that being angry at somebody or yelling at somebody, like the fire and brimstone that, I was taught in the 90s as a teenager, like turn or burn. Do you think that's really driving people to Jesus?
No,
I didn't know Jesus going and like yelling at people constantly to be like, you should know my father.
Oh, I know. Well, I actually I can't remember which blog it is, but I have a post where I talk about the Starbucks cup. And this is my theory. I think Starbucks does that to sell coffee. Absolutely. It's like, let's just go ahead and do, and here, I'm here to, you could put 666 on my Starbucks coffee cup. I'm still going to drink it. I love it. I need it in my life. And so if it's wrong, I don't want to be right, but it's ridiculous. I actually do have a post that's called, Dear 999,999moms.com. Here's where I get off because they've done something so ridiculous and because of their offense. They're offended by something. And so here we sit being offended by something instead of really doing something, instead of really changing the world, we're just offended.
Well, and you have to give, Starbucks and all those people such credit. I mean, even Nike, the outrage over the guy that kneeled or whatever. Yeah. There's 12 different sides of that story, but you have to give them credit because, you do realize they're marketing geniuses, right?
They are
Because
marketing
you're talking
geniuses.
about them. And I wasn't thinking about Nike, but I just went out and bought some of their shoes. Thank you for talking about them, because I was like, oh, these shoes are really comfortable. I don't care about the ad. I don't care about what's on the Starbucks cup. I'm thirsty. Okay.
Yes, I know. Right. Well, yeah. Somebody emailed me and said, as a Marine mom, I'm sure you're just so offended by this and this and this and this. And I was like, nope. I like to always say, no offense comes from the Lord, and lucky for you, I'm not him. But
Exactly.
I have a son that signed up to be in the military so that you can have those opinions, and I have a God that died so that you can be redeemed for whatever. So what's it to me? I don't care. Yeah. And it's not. I think if my Marine, as they call him, walked out onto the field and somebody had a protest, I would know that he still is willing to lay down his life for whatever protest.
Absolutely.
I've kind of come to this place, and I used to rant and rave about stuff and get upset, but really and truly, my goal is strictly Jesus Christ. And when that is your goal, I find a lot of things a lot less offensive, because he was not offended and he was not offensive.
That is a good point. It's funny you mentioned that, because my husband is a disabled veteran. He fought right after 9/11 in Afghanistan. And he always talks about, I fought for those freedoms so that you could, do I like it? No. But does it bother me? Not really, because that was the whole goal of me going over there and fighting for you. And I'm sure your son is the same way. It's going back to the contingent God. He's not fighting on contingent of whether or not someone's complaining about a Starbucks cup or a kid kneeling on the football field. I don't feel like his commitment to our country is wavering. No. Otherwise, he would have signed that contract.
Yeah. It's been years ago, but it was within a church. So it was a pro-life, anti-abortion thing. And I just, of course, as someone that loves mama hearts and women's hearts, I hate any of that struggle. But I remember that the guy that was talking said that it was, that us being there and us praying against it was holding back the hand of God from destroying us because of abortion. And I was like, I remember thinking, that's not true. That's not true. He wants life, and he wants life abundant, and he wants us to know him. But his wrath was settled on Calvary. And he's not a Democrat, and he's not a Republican, and redemption is for all, which was the other thing that I thought was so dangerous about some of the stuff that was being said there, is that there's an idea that there's one thing that is his last straw.
Yeah.
His last straw was resolved. And even the people that we disagree with, even the people that disgust us, even the actions that make our stomachs turn or make us just go, do what? Are not something that he can't redeem. He offers it to all. And I had kind of an interaction with somebody that I try not to argue with people, but this was face to face. So she was saying that you can't tell people that he loves unconditionally because it's so dangerous, because they're going to do this, this, and this. No, they're doing this, this, and this already.
Yeah, anyway.
And guess what? He said he'd die for it. He died for that too. And so it separates people from him in that the idea that there's anything that he's like all of a sudden goes, oh my gosh, I didn't think of that. They did what? There's drinking in the bar. There's gambling in the casino. Like he's up there being shocked in any way, or, I forgot about that. Or even to that end, how did Joel Osteen get 4,000 people to come listen to him on Sunday mornings? I never thought he'd do that. Or how did Beth Moore get on stage? I said no women in the church. I mean, it's seriously, he's so much bigger than that. And there's, in that understanding, it's not that we then continue to sin. There's things that maybe we go, hey, wait a minute, that's not for me. And it's conviction, it's not condemnation. And knowing that about him is the thing that delights me to speak of him, because nothing can separate you from the love of Jesus. And he knew about that too.
God doesn't gasp.
He does not gasp. He never once says, God, what?
Oh, I knew I loved you. But then you wrote a post last week was it last week? Yeah, I think it was. And it said, often on my Facebook page, I ask to pray for you. Frequently I'm undone by the request. At this point, there's no reason in the world for me to pretend to be something I'm not. I have prayed for you, but I've also counted all my pennies and Googled ways to hide your cheating husband's bodies. Oh, I love that you're on both sides of that coin, because then you're genuine and you're vulnerable and you're honest. And every good friend has a shovel in their trunk waiting for the good word, from all you need is an alibi.
Yeah, I know.
You provided. And then
hey, I've watched enough real crime TV that I know what not to do.
Yes. I used to watch Snapped. And
I was watching that show. We should be best friends. I love that show. My husband's like, why are you watching this again? I'm like, I just love it. I can't stop.
I used to watch it when I was younger, and I was married before my ex-husband, and he would come home and he'd be like, why are you watching that? And I'm like, I'm taking notes. Beware. Time is ticking down.
They're always their mistakes are always so obvious. I'm like, hey, girl, you were so close.
Exactly. You could have gotten away. See, I'm the genius that's going to get it right this time.
I know.
Right? Make a TV show about me, because they're never going to find me.
No, I really do think there's, as far as that, when I say stuff like that, and I did get a little backlash, a couple of emails, and then there's always that unfollowing. I'm like, okay, unfollow me. But what's the point? If I just think there's nothing more irritating in the world than listening to somebody that's perfect.
I know. Because
I don't have time for you.
Exactly. If your house is always clean and spotless and that's all you post on social media, that's worth an unfollow right there.
I know.
I can't keep up.
No.
Okay. So we talked about, I just love where this conversation went, because it just went a million different ways, and
it did.
But what are some of the lessons you've raised? Well, you have 3 adult kids. You've still got 3 at home. What are some of the lessons that you're working on that were important to you growing up, that are something that you're working on changing for this next generation that you're raising?
It's kind of hard to say for sure, because they're very different. And I think, let's say, I'll say this: unconditional love. That's the most important thing I think you can teach anybody, is unconditional love. Is that, and I've always done this, but I'm more outspoken about it now, is when I hear judgment, I like to play, if you want to call it devil's advocate. I don't think it's the devil at all. I think it's actually Jesus going, but wait, what brought that into existence? What brought that? And is it something that cannot be restored? And there's no such thing. There's no such thing as it not being something that he can make new and better and okay. And so I really did, with the first batch that we call the originals, there was a lot of that, this is bad, this is good, don't do this, do this, or else. And there is no or else. There's natural consequences, but in our walk as believers, and that even goes for as far as, and because I get this all the time, well, my child's not a believer. So you are.
Yeah.
And you cannot make someone love Jesus, but you can model that, and you can pray for that, and you can believe that he wants that as much as, if not more, a billion times more than you do.
Yes.
And I think that with the originals, I was so worried about their salvation, and I was obsessed with it. And we can't do that. It completely hobbles us in our ability to minister and our ability to even, evangelize if we think it's up to us. And one of my favorite things I see on social media, or in churches and stuff like this, somebody will say, well, I gave my testimony and I saved so-and-so. Really? Wow. Good for you. But we think we can save our children. And so I really do. And even my children's faith is nothing like what my faith was when I was their age, or what it is like now, or what it was like then. So I have a lot more faith in what God can do in their lives and what I believe he will do in their lives than anything that I can make happen.
Yeah,
and
that you could say or do.
I think I come across a lot more genuine in that when I'm, instead of trying to convince them that I have it all set. But for one thing, they didn't see that, especially the originals, because I, at that point in my life, was so terrorized by everything because I was serving an if then Jesus. And so they heard me say the things that we say, like nothing can separate me from the love of God. But oh my gosh, no, nothing can separate us from Him. And so even Luke, that is, like I said, a big part of Sacred Ground, Sticky Floors because of his struggles and the trials that we went through. He wrote the afterword, and he starts it, I am an agnostic. And I had somebody interview me the other day, and they're like, doesn't that break your heart? And I was like, did you read on? I am agnostic who constantly is in search of a God who adores me. Yeah. That's not going to waste. Yeah. And it's not my deal. I raised him. I cut the crust off his toast. I taught him to tie his shoes. I loved him. I love him. But with what I can't make an apple seed turn into an apple tree. I cannot. I can nurture it. I can water it. I can give it fertilizer, but I can't make it turn into an apple tree, and I can't make it produce fruit. I cannot do that. So why would I think that this seed that I was given, this child that I was given, I can make him turn into a pastor or or any of those things? I nurtured that plant, and I trust the one that does grow things into mature trees and fruit and life to do the rest. I believe that he will.
Because he's faithful.
Yes.
What is something you talked about? Some, like right now you're in a valley, and you talked about serving the if then Jesus and taking it back. What is something that you would tell that version of yourself, whether it was in your teens, your 20s, your 30s, wherever it was at? What is something that you would tell that mom, that wife that's struggling through her story right now?
Well, first of all, to look at whether or not you're serving an if then Jesus, because it is so important in dealing with our true emotions. If you think you're in trouble because you're depressed, if you think God's mad at you because your husband cheated, if you think that, you're drinking too much and so he's mad at you, you're serving an if then Jesus. And that if then Jesus is without any hope, because we are not perfect, and he knew we weren't perfect. That's why he died. I would say on the other side of that getting away from the if then Jesus has a little, if not a lot of a lull, because there's this part of you that all of a sudden really realizes that all Harry Carey can break loose. And it's completely, yeah. And no matter if your laundry is folded or if you went to church on Wednesday or you paid your tithes or any of those things, it can all come crashing down around you. And it is a very hopeless, scary feeling until you put your focus back on who he is and how he saves. And even to the end, he overcame death. He overcame the world. And so our very worst case scenarios, which in most cases for mamas, is the idea of death for one of our children.
Yes.
He even overcame that. Mm. And I hear this all the time, and I said it myself, I could never do foster care because I'm afraid I'd get hurt. But when we really look at that, what that means, I'm afraid I'd get hurt. You're going to get hurt. And you're going to get hurt in a lot of places, whether you sign up for it or whether you're just walking around the house without shoes on.
Yeah.
Something's going to hurt. So the entirety of that phrase, I'm afraid. Okay. Yeah, me too. But perfect love casts out all fear. And so when our focus is on perfect love, which perfect love is Jesus, it does subside in so many ways and in so many aspects of my life. Even when I'm hurting, I'm not afraid of hurting. I'm not afraid, which is huge because that really is the catalyst for most mamas. We don't want to hurt. We don't want our kids to hurt because that's bad, right?
Yeah.
But we can't be afraid of hurting.
Yeah.
And we don't have to be afraid of hurting because our comfort comes from Jesus and he is perfect. So I guess that would be it. I say it to myself a lot. I mean, I used to fear grief more than anything on the planet. I was afraid of the process of grief. And he revealed to me in the process of losing Joy babies, most specifically, that, grief is a celebration of a loss. It's an emotion that he gave us to work out and work through and work in our suffering. It's something he ordained, he allowed to happen. And it is a celebration. And so in this valley that I'm in, where we're now, I think, 15 months out from Joy baby being gone and John being gone and holidays coming and book launch and all the numbers games and all of that stuff, where I'm hurting, what I'm not doing is thinking I'm in trouble for that hurt. Yeah. I'm celebrating how I loved, how I lost, how I'm living. And it is a low spot. I can't get on here and tell you that everything's peachy keen, but I can get on here and tell you that I'm loved.
Yeah. That's powerful. Thank you so much. You're a delight. You're a hoot.
I love you. Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. It was super fun. And yeah.
And can you give everyone the details on where to find you, your website, all your information? Give everybody.
Sure. It's most easy to find me at sacredgroundstickyfloors.com, because all my social stuff is there. And on Twitter, I'm at Jami Amerine. Oh, Instagram, I'm at Jami Amerine. On Facebook, because I didn't know what I was doing, it's Jami Amarene's Sacred Ground Sticky Floors. But actually, just if you type in my name anymore, it usually takes you straight to my website or my books. And my books are where all books are sold for the most part.
I just love this conversation for all the ways that it went. If I had to pick just a few of my favorite things, it's that I'd like you to walk away with the idea of the if then Jesus, and that if God's love is conditional, like, what are we all doing here, right? And then changing the but to a now then. Like, instead of saying I love you, but you say I love you, period. Now then, and then dealing with whatever issue it is that we end up dealing with in our relationships and with our parenting. I urge you to check out some of her viral posts. They're hilarious. The 2 reasons to hate Joel Osteen. Yeah, I think I'm going to pin that one to my page just so y'all can find it quicker. And then the other one about the open letter to her kids, how you're not that great. I will pin those on my Pinterest for you. My username on Pinterest is Wendy J. Olson, so I'll have those up on the page for you. And then just you can't make your kids love Jesus. Oh, so true. So true. So full of wisdom, this lady. I will have all of her information and click and all that stuff on the show notes. If you're looking to catch up with me after the podcast and in between, you can find me at MRS Mrs. Wendy J. Olson, OLSON, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or on wendyjolson.com. Thanks for joining us. See you guys next week.